7:59 a.m. Leonard Drake's voice cut through his office like a verdict. "Adrian, if you won't train Brandon, you don't belong here anymore." That was it. One sentence and a decade of my career at Cypress Technologies was over before I'd even touched my first sip of coffee. My name is Adrian Cole, Senior Technical Architect, the man who built the systems that held Cypress's billion-dollar valuation together. 10 years of code patents and sleepless nights, all erased in less time than it takes to scan a termination memo. The mug in my hand, a chipped World's Best Boss gift from my team last Christmas, suddenly felt heavier than lead. I set it down on the polished walnut desk between us, watching the steam curl into the cold air. The irony wasn't lost on me. World's Best Boss handed to me by the people who knew the truth, sitting now in front of a man who couldn't care less. "You're telling me I'm terminated," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Leonard leaned back his leather chair, sighing under his weight. "Terminated, no. Let's call it a misalignment with company culture." The phrase rolled off his tongue like it was rehearsed. He'd probably signed the HR paperwork before I walked in. Behind him, the morning skyline stretched wide through floor-to-ceiling glass. Half the buildings in that view ran on the systems I'd designed, though no one in this office would admit it. "Leonard, I said you're asking me to walk away from 17 active projects so your cousin can play executive. Brandon Kerr, 25, no background in engineering, more Instagram followers than lines of code written in his life. But he was family Leonard's family, and that outweighed every contribution I'd ever made." Leonard waved his hand as though brushing crumbs from a suit jacket. "Brandon isn't playing. He's the future of this company. The board wants him groomed, and you're the best teacher we have." I thought of the nights I'd stayed in the server room past midnight debugging alone, while Leonard drank scotch in a private lounge. The weekends I missed with my family because Cypress needed a product ready for Monday. The patents filed under his name, even though the math had come from my hand. And now he wanted me to babysit a cousin who still struggled with basic loops. My ID badge clipped to my belt caught the morning light. That laminated square had been my identity here for 10 years, proof I belonged. I knew in that moment it would be stripped away before the hour was out. "I'm not doing it," I said finally. "Quiet, steady." His jaw tightened. He pressed the intercom. "Sylvia, send HR up, and bring security." The words weren't a negotiation. They were an execution. Within minutes, I'd be signing a severance waiver designed to protect the company. They'd remind me about the NDA, the penalties, the boilerplate about returning all property. It was all a formality. The truth was, they thought I was walking out with nothing. Leonard smirked when he saw me glance down at the mug again. "Don't forget your things on the way out. Security will give you 15 minutes. 15 minutes to erase 10 years. I picked up the mug once more, holding it carefully. The cheap ceramic was warm, the paint scratched from too many dishwashing cycles. My team had chipped in for it, a silly gift that had carried me through hard nights when I doubted the grind was worth it. Now it was a funeral object, a reminder that loyalty here meant nothing. I set it down on his desk with a soft thud. My pulse was steady, my expression neutral, because Leonard Drake didn't realize something I had known for months. The countdown had already started the day Brandon Kerr walked through these doors with hollow confidence and a smile that didn't belong. And at 7:59 a.m., Leonard thought he had fired me. But by noon, he would realize the truth. He hadn't fired me. He'd fired himself. Before I dive deeper, let me know, where are you listening from? Right now, I'd love to connect in the comments. I should have seen it coming the moment Brandon Kerr strutted into the building a week earlier. He didn't arrive like a new hire. He arrived like royalty. Designer suit leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage and a smile rehearsed for social media. Not business. His first day at Cypress, he posted a selfie from the executive floor with the caption, "Future of Tech starts here." I'd built the architecture that powered this company from the ground up. Brandon hadn't even built a working calculator app. But he was Leonard Drake's cousin, and that was the only credential that mattered. When Leonard summoned me to his office at 7:45 this morning, I walked in expecting a strategy review. We had a $1.3 billion valuation riding on the upcoming investor demo. Instead, I found 2 coffee cups on his desk, one untouched, one meant for me, and Brandon already sitting in the chair across from mine, scrolling on his phone. Leonard didn't even offer me the seat. He just started pacing Italian loafers, tapping against the marble. "Adrian," he said, "I need you to take on a special project. Brandon is going to lead our innovation team. He just needs you to get him up to speed on Monarch's architecture. Show him the ropes. My stomach sank. Monarch wasn't just another project, it was the backbone of Cyprus's future. 10 years of my life, millions of lines of code, 43 patents. And now, Leonard wanted me to teach his cousin what a function was. Leonard, why, I said carefully, I'm currently managing 17 critical projects. The Durham demo alone. He cut me off with a raised hand. This is the priority now. Brandon is family, he's the future of this company. Brandon finally looked up, flashing a grin. I'll need your login credentials too. Uncle Leonard says Monarch isn't that complicated once you understand the basics. I nearly laughed. Not that complicated. The arrogance was almost impressive. He had no idea what it meant to design nested security protocols or optimize for enterprise-grade performance. But he was ready to inherit what I had bled to build. My ID badge clipped at my belt caught the morning light. That laminated square had carried me into late-night deployments, emergency war rooms, last-minute board presentations. Now, it felt less like a symbol of belonging, and more like a countdown clock waiting to be revoked. Perhaps someone from training could walk Brandon through the fundamentals, I said evenly. My team needs me focused on the Durham deal. Leonard stopped pacing and fixed me with a stare. His jaw tightened. I'd seen that look before in boardrooms whenever someone questioned him. It meant the decision was already made, and resistance would be punished. You're refusing a direct request from your CEO, he asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were red. I'm prioritizing the company's interests, I replied. Monarch is too complex to be treated as a training exercise. Brandon chuckled. Don't worry, Uncle. If he won't help, I'll figure it out. How hard can it be? That single sentence sealed my fate. Leonard slammed his hand on the desk. Enough. You're done here, Adrian. He pressed the intercom. Sylvia, bring HR up and send security. I exhaled slowly. That was it. My badge, my projects, my access already marked for deletion. In fact, by the time Sylvia Knox stepped into the office with a folder in her hands, my credentials were already disabled. The paperwork in her grip was time-stamped 7:42 a.m. before I'd even walked in. It wasn't a meeting. It was a setup. Brandon had been positioned as heir from day one, and I was disposable the moment I refused to play along. Leonard turned back to me. Security will give you 15 minutes to collect your things. 15 minutes to erase 10 years. I stood sliding the mug back into my palm. Its warmth was fading, just like my patience. I looked at Brandon one last time, his smug expression. His phone angled for another post, his ignorance wrapped in confidence. Good luck with Monarch, I said softly, especially level 17. His brows furrowed. What's level 17? I smiled faintly, not answering. Leonard waved his hand again, already dismissing me like an entry-level intern. As I stepped past Sylvia, her eyes flickered to my badge. For a second I thought I saw something like pity there, maybe even respect. The badge would be deactivated in the system within minutes, but Brandon had just inherited more than he could ever understand. And Leonard had just declared war without realizing the battlefield was already mine. Have you ever watched someone get handed power they didn't earn while you carried the weight? That's the moment I was living. They thought they'd strip me of everything. What they didn't know was that I still held the keys. By 7:58 a.m., 2 security guards were already waiting outside Leonard's office, ready to walk me down that long glass hallway. The walk from Leonard Drake's office to my own felt like a funeral procession. 2 men flanked me, Derek Shaw on my left, Paul Riker on my right. I knew them both. Derek was the kind of guard who always had a dad joke ready when I passed through security in the mornings. Paul had once helped me jump my car in the parking lot during a thunderstorm. We weren't friends, but we'd shared enough small talk over the years that this silence felt heavier than any words. Sorry, Adrian, Derek muttered without meeting my eyes. It wasn't their choice. It never is. HR made the call, and security just enforced it. Still, each step down the executive corridor cut deeper. Through the glass walls of engineering, I could see my team hunched over their monitors, the glow of code reflected off their faces. No one looked up. In this building, gossip moved faster than fiber optics everyone already knew. I was finished. And if they acknowledged me even with a nod, they'd risk being next. Sylvia Knox trailed behind us, folder in hand. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The timestamp on that paperwork had already told me everything my firing was scheduled before I'd walked into Leonard's office. Inside that folder, I knew exactly what I'd find: a severance release, a reminder of the NDA penalties, and the standard waiver of claims that corporate always slipped in when they wanted to cover their tracks. When we reached my office, everything was exactly as I'd left it less than an hour earlier. My desk still held a half-finished coffee. My screens were alive with open documents, diagrams of Monarch's architecture test logs from last night's build, the Durham demo checklist. All of it frozen in time, suddenly belonging to someone else. 15 minutes, Paul said quietly, checking his watch. I nodded. The ritual was familiar. Every terminated employee learns it by heart. Personal items only, nothing that could be considered company property. I opened my desk drawer, my hands moving mechanically. Photo of my mother at her remission celebration, frame shot of the team at last year's product launch, the ergonomic mousepad I'd bought after too many 2 a.m. coding marathons. And then under a stack of conference lanyards and faded notebooks, I felt at the black USB drive no bigger than my thumb. To anyone else, it looked like a storage stick for vacation photos or tax returns. But to me, it was the most important object in the room. I slipped it into my jacket pocket in one smooth motion. Neither Derek nor Paul reacted. Maybe they saw it. Maybe they didn't. Either way, it didn't matter. The drive didn't contain stolen code. It contained something far more powerful, the original incorporation documents for Morgan Technologies, LLC. The safety net I had built years ago when I first suspected Leonard might try something like this. "Caught you," a voice chirped from the doorway. Brandon Kerr stood there, phone held high, already recording. His designer jacket shimmered under the fluorescent light as he zoomed in on me, packing my things. "I'm documenting this for Uncle Leonard," he said. "Can't have you stealing company secrets." I turned, keeping my expression neutral. Inside anger coiled in my chest. "Hello, Brandon. Congratulations on your new position," I said evenly. The cordial tone threw him. His phone dipped slightly. "Yeah, well, Uncle says I'll be taking over your projects. Monarch isn't that complicated once you get the hang of it." Behind him, Derek rolled his eyes so subtly it was almost imperceptible. Paul's jaw clenched. "I'm sure you'll do wonderfully," I replied, wrapping my mug in the tissue paper. Brandon frowned. "You should probably leave your passwords. Uncle says you people always try to sabotage things when you leave." You people. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "All my credentials were revoked at 7:59, I said, slipping the framed Monarch Hello World output into my box. 8 will need to create new access protocols for you." He blinked, not understanding half of what I'd just said. "Well, whatever. Just make sure you don't take anything important. I'll be watching." I zipped my bag closed and stood. My gaze swept the office one last time. 10 years of late nights, caffeine-fueled breakthroughs, failures turned into triumphs, all of it about to be claimed by someone who hadn't earned a second of it. "It's all yours," I said, gesturing to the desk. Then I leaned in just slightly enough that only Brandon could hear. "Good luck with level 17. "What's level 17? He asked, confused. "Nothing you need to worry about," I said, brushing past him. Derek and Paul fell into step beside me. The box of my possessions felt lighter than the drive in my pocket. The elevator doors opened, reflecting my image back at me. Same navy blazer, same badge clipped to my belt, same face I'd seen in the mirror at dawn. But everything had changed. Have you ever walked out of a place you gave your best years to, knowing they'd already replaced you before you left the room? That's the moment I was living, because Leonard thought I was walking out defeated. What he didn't realize was that I was walking out armed. I didn't come up with Coal Dynamics LLC on a whim. It wasn't a late-night spark of brilliance or a lucky afterthought. It was survival. 3 years ago, I sat across a walnut conference table from Martin Keene, a corporate lawyer whose office smelled faintly of old books and stronger bourbon. He'd been recommended by a former client, a man who whispered that if I ever wanted to protect what I'd built, Martin was the one to call. Back then, my mother was fighting cancer. Treatment costs were mounting, and I knew if Leonard Drake ever found an excuse, he'd cut me loose without a second thought. Monarch, the system I was building, was too valuable to leave unguarded. I needed an insurance policy, something airtight. Martin had adjusted his glasses and asked me the same question 3 times. "Adrian, are you sure you want to do this?" "It's just precaution," I told him. "I hope I never need it. But if Cypress decides to turn on me..." I let the thought trail off. Martin leaned back in his chair. Then, "You want to make sure they can't own what you created." "I understand." Together, we structured it carefully. Monarch's core patents were filed under Coal Dynamics LLC with my mother as the majority stakeholder. Cypress had exclusive licensing rights, but only as long as my employment remained active and voluntary. Termination without cause or resignation under duress would trigger a verification clause. Without it, Monarch would enter protective mode, freezing until the rightful licensing authority intervened. Martin even insisted on placing a protective escrow filing with the Patent Office. If Cypress ever tried to challenge ownership, the escrow would automatically release the incorporation papers and the waiver of assignment rights proving Monarch had never belonged to them. That clause was my level 17, the final layer buried deep inside Monarch's logic, invisible to executives, untouchable to IT. And Leonard Drake had just activated it himself at 7:59 a.m. I remembered Martin's words that day as clearly as if he were sitting beside me in the elevator now. Adrian, you're building yourself a parachute. You pray you never have to pull the cord, but if you do, it'll be the cleanest landing anyone's ever seen. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me down, Derek and Paul still standing like shadows on either side. They thought they were escorting me out in disgrace. What they didn't realize was that I was already halfway into a plan that Leonard himself had triggered. When the doors opened, I walked past the lobby without looking back. My badge didn't beep, it was already deactivated. My access was gone. But access was never the same thing as ownership. Ownership was in my pocket sitting on that black USB drive. I thought briefly of the chipped World's Best Boss mug I'd left on Leonard's desk upstairs. They could keep the mug. What mattered couldn't be boxed or carried out. I stepped out into the morning air, the city's hum rising up around me. The rush of traffic, the smell of coffee from the vendor on the corner, the clatter of shoes on pavement, it all felt sharper, like the world had tilted, and I was finally seeing it clearly. At 8:14 a.m., I was no longer an employee of Cypress Technologies, but I was still the architect of Monarch, and legally, I was still its owner. Most people saw software as lines of code numbers on a screen. But Monarch wasn't just software. It was architecture-layered security contracts written into logic gates. Every protocol was bound to my role as architect. Strip me of that, and Monarch would refuse to run like a body rejecting a foreign organ. Leonard thought firing me would remove an obstacle. What he didn't realize was that firing me removed the keystone. I thought of my mother that morning, probably in her kitchen sipping tea and trying not to worry about medical bills. She had no idea she was the legal majority owner of a system valued at over $1 billion. I'd structured it that way, so if anything happened to me, she'd never have to fight for survival again. Have you ever built something so valuable that you couldn't afford to leave it in anyone else's hands? That's what Monarch was to me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Martin Keene's number. We hadn't spoken since that day 3 years ago, but I knew he'd remember me. Men like Martin never forget the clients who pay for precision. Mr. Cole, he answered after 2 rings. His voice was dry, steady. I heard some chatter this morning. Cypress made their move. They did, I said. And the clause we set up, it's live. A pause. Then the faintest chuckle. Then Leonard Drake just handed you his company without realizing it. Not yet, I said, stepping off the curb toward the parking garage. But give it a couple of hours. Martin's tone sharpened. I'll prepare the filings. Don't respond to anything from Cypress until I contact you. They'll panic when they realize what's happened. I'm counting on it. I ended the call, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Above me, the mirrored windows of Cypress reflected the rising sun. Somewhere inside, Brandon Kerr was probably celebrating his promotion. Leonard was probably congratulating himself, and Sylvia was already filing my termination into HR's database. They thought this was over. It hadn't even started. The box of my possessions sat on the passenger seat of my car, but my real leverage was no bigger than a thumb drive. I slid into the driver's seat, powered up my laptop, and watched the screen bloom to life under the fluorescent hum of the parking garage. Monarch's interface appeared clean and minimalist, the way I had always designed it. Most people thought of Monarch as software predictive analytics, natural language, processing a sleek chatbot demo you could parade in front of investors. But beneath that surface was the real architecture, 17 layers of security logic, each interlocked, each written by my hand. I logged in, not with my Cypress credentials, those were already dead, but with my architect credentials, the ones no one else knew existed. The system responded immediately. Welcome, architect. System status operational. Layers 1 to 16 active. Layer 17 standby mode. I hovered over the command. Layer 17 had never been triggered before. It wasn't meant for daily use. It was the tripwire, the insurance policy, the final clause Martin Keene and I had drafted 3 years ago. Employment status terminated. Cause corporate directive. clause verification required. I pressed enter. The interface shifted the screen, filling with a countdown, clock 90:00. The timer began its relentless descent. 90 minutes. That was all Leonard Drake had before Monarch locked itself in protective mode, refusing any access until Cold Dynamics LLC authorized relicensing. I leaned back watching the digits tick down. 89:47, 89:46. And for just a second, doubt crept in. What if Layer 17 misfired? What if Monarch froze permanently? Even for me, I pushed the thought down. No. I'd tested every branch of the logic tree a dozen times. It would work. But even architects have moments where the foundation feels shaky. My phone buzzed. A message from Jordan Patel, my most trusted developer. Heard what happened. Team's ready to walk. Do we move now? Not yet, I typed back. Wait until after the 9:30 demo. You'll see why. A long pause, then 3 dots. Adrian. What did you do? Nothing. Just letting nature take its course. I closed the chat and stared at the screen. My pulse was steady. 10 years of work had just flipped into a test of timing. At 9:30, Leonard planned to demonstrate Monarch to Durham Equity Partners. $1 billion investment hinged on that demo, and every passing second was dragging Monarch closer to the point of no return. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd fired me at 7:59 a.m., probably imagining I'd be out drinking my frustrations away by noon. Instead, I was sitting in my car watching the very system they'd stolen unravel on schedule. The countdown hit 82:13. I thought about Leonard in his corner office smoothing his tie, rehearsing lines about visionary leadership. I thought about Brandon Kerr probably posting selfies from my old chair. And I thought about Sylvia Knox sliding my termination into HR's system, convinced she was just doing her job. I could picture IT upstairs scrambling through their emergency override manual, trying every trick in the policy binder, none of which would matter, because the system wasn't theirs to override. And I remembered my badge already useless at 7:59, the sensor flashing red, as if to say I didn't exist anymore. That piece of plastic might not open doors, but Monarch still knew my name. Have you ever sat with a secret so big it felt like holding the detonator to a bomb? That's what that countdown felt like. At 9:05, my phone lit up again, this time a call. Martin Keene. Adrian, he said without preamble. They'll hit panic mode within the hour. Do not answer any calls from Cyprus. Let them stew. They'll try to force it, I said. Hack, bypass, throw money at mercenaries. None of it will matter. Martin chuckled. They'll learn that the hard way. Meanwhile, I'll prepare the filings for when the system officially locks. Good. I'll be ready. When the call ended, I sat in silence, watching the garage shadows shift across my windshield. My laptop screen glowed steadily, the numbers marching downward, 71:32, 71:31. The trap wasn't sprung yet, but it was coming. And when Leonard Drake walked into that boardroom at 9:30, he'd find out that the future he promised investors was slipping through his fingers second by second. Have you ever been written off at work only to hold the one thing they couldn't take from you? If you've lived through a moment like that, or even just imagined it, I'd like to hear it. Drop your story in the comments because I know I'm not the only one who's had to sit quietly with a secret that changes everything. At 9:30 on the dot, the polished boardroom on the 41st floor of Cyprus was packed. Leonard Drake stood at the head of the long mahogany table, projecting confidence in his custom-tailored suit. Brandon Kerr sat 2 chairs down, grinning at his tablet as if the company's future were already secured. Sylvia Knox hovered in the background with a stack of HR folders ready to spin whatever narrative the board needed. Across from them sat Charles Whitman, the lead partner from Durham Equity. He was the kind of investor who rarely wasted words. A single glance from him could add or erase millions in valuation. And today, he had come for proof. Proof that Monarch could justify a $1.3 billion commitment. The second hand on the boardroom's antique clock ticked over to 9:31 as Leonard began. Gentlemen, ladies, he said smoothly, what you are about to see is the future of enterprise AI. Monarch is more than software. It's a revolution in data architecture, predictive modeling, and adaptive intelligence. Under my leadership, Cyprus has built a product that will transform how global companies operate. Charles raised one eyebrow. We'll judge that for ourselves. Show us. Leonard nodded to the demonstration engineer, a man in a crisp shirt who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Fingers flew across the keyboard, and the wall of screens lit up with Monarch's initialization sequence. For 12 seconds, everything looked perfect. Sleek interface, smooth load numbers scrolling like poetry. And then the first error message appeared. System architect verification required. The engineer frowned, typed again. Access denied, authentication failure. Just a minor hiccup, Leonard said quickly, his smile too wide, his voice a touch too sharp. Our system has robust security. Give it a moment. The engineer tried again, sweat visible at his temple. The screens flashed red. Licensing verification required. Time remaining 57 hours 8. Contact system architect for resolution. Murmurs spread across the room. Charles leaned forward. Mr. Drake, is your system locked? No, of course not. It's a routine security protocol, Leonard insisted, his jaw tightening. Our architect credentials are in place. Interim CTO, fix this. The interim CTO looked pale as he typed. His voice cracked. Sir, these aren't standard credentials. This looks like an embedded licensing clause. I've never seen this before. Leonard slammed his hand on the table. Then bypass it. Do whatever it takes. The interim CTO tried a forced admin override, digging into the system logs. The words scrolled across the screen in the harsh black letters. Override attempt rejected. Architect verification required. The room went silent except for the tick of the boardroom clock. 56:12, 56:11. Sylvia Knox cleared her throat. Leonard, should I reach out to? Not one word, Sylvia. Leonard snapped. Charles's tone had shifted from curious to cold. Mr. Drake, we've flown across the country for this demonstration. You promised us a product ready for immediate deployment. Instead, I'm watching your flagship system reject you like a firewall against its own creators. Care to explain? Leonard's face flushed crimson. Brandon leaned forward, whispering, Uncle Leonard, maybe. Shut up, Brandon, Leonard hissed. The engineer tried one last command. The screen responded. For licensing inquiries, contact Cole Dynamics LLC. Authorized Representative Margaret Cole. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Charles Whitman's eyes narrowed. And who exactly is Margaret Cole? No one answered. Somewhere 6 blocks away, I was watching it unfold in real time. Jordan had patched me into a Slack back channel where my former teammates were narrating the chaos. Screenshots poured in red warnings, error logs, the interim CTO's frantic commands. One message stood out. Leonard just threw his water glass against the wall. I smiled to myself, sipping coffee that tasted better than anything I'd ever poured in that building. And for just a second, I flashed back to a board meeting. Last year, Leonard, pounding his chest, promising Monarch would never fail in front of investors. Now, the very system he dismissed me from was proving him wrong second by second. Have you ever seen someone lose control in real time, every second of their arrogance unraveling in front of people they can't afford to disappoint? That's exactly what was happening on the 41st floor. Charles stood collecting his notes with measured calm. Mr. Drake, until you resolve this licensing matter, Durham has no basis to proceed. We'll be in touch. Leonard lurched forward, his voice cracking. Wait, this is just a temporary glitch. Give me 1 hour. But Charles was already walking out, followed by the entire Durham delegation. The door closed behind them with the kind of finality no CEO ever wants to hear. Back in the boardroom, panic detonated. Brandon shouted, the interim CTO stammered. Sylvia tried to call legal. The engineers looked like trapped animals. And above it all, the countdown ticked mercilessly on. 53:02, 53:01. And above it all, the countdown ticked mercilessly on, while I held the only key that could stop it. The Durham team hadn't even cleared the lobby before Cyprus imploded. Leonard Drake stormed out of the boardroom, his face the color of a warning light. Brandon Kerr trailed behind him, sputtering excuses that died under Leonard's glare. Sylvia Knox rushed after them, phone pressed to her ear, rattling off orders to legal HR anyone who would pick up. Inside the boardroom, the interim CTO was still hunched over the terminal, desperately running diagnostics. Error after error scrolled past. Each line was a reminder that Monarch no longer belonged to them. System architect verification required. Licensing inquiries, Cole Dynamics LLC. Jordan Patel's messages pinged through my Slack back channel like a live ticker tape. Leonard just screamed at the interim CTO to find the damn architect. Another ping. They're pulling in IT, trying emergency override again. Logs say, access denied. I leaned back in my seat at the law office, coffee in hand. The box of my possessions sat quietly in the corner, my world's best boss mug still wrapped in tissue paper. A few hours ago, it looked like the sad ritual of being discarded. Now it felt more like a trophy I'd carried out under their noses. By 10:02, Sylvia was in full damage control mode. I could picture her striding down the corridor, stilettos snapping against the marble HR assistant scrambling behind her. She had always been efficient, but this wasn't about efficiency anymore. This was about survival. Her email went out company-wide at 10:07. Jordan forwarded it instantly. Subject urgent. Internal security breach. All staff are instructed to refrain from external communication regarding Monarch until further notice. Failure to comply will result in immediate disciplinary action. I laughed out loud. A gag order. Classic Sylvia. HR loved to believe fear could stop a hemorrhage. But Monarch wasn't just bleeding, it was arterial, and every employee could see the spray. Jordan's next message made me pause. Adrian, they're talking about calling you back. Leonard's saying if they can just buy your cooperation, Durham might reconsider. That flicker of self-doubt from earlier stirred again. Would they really try to buy me back? Would they dangle titles, bonuses, power? And for a second I wondered if Leonard had respected me from the beginning. Would I have stayed? I flashed back to my first HR orientation, Sylvia herself, pointing at a slide that read, "Mutual respect is the cornerstone of our culture." Even then I remember thinking the slogan was more wishful thinking than policy. Now it felt like the cruelest joke of all. At 10:15 my phone lit up with a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another call. Then another. Finally a text popped up from a number I recognized, Cyprus Legal Counsel. "Adrian, this is Harold from Legal. Please contact us immediately. We can work this out amicably." Amicably. That word carried the weight of panic wrapped in a suit. I imagined Harold pacing his office tie, askew sweat dampening his collar. By the time he typed amicably, the stock price was probably already nosediving. Have you ever had someone threaten you 1 hour, then beg for your help the next? That's the kind of whiplash money can't hide. Meanwhile, Jordan fed me more updates. The interim CTO had pulled in 2 outside consultants, freelancers, who looked at the logs and shook their heads. One even muttered, "This architecture's locked tighter than anything I've ever seen." Leonard snapped. "Then break it." "Sir, this isn't something you brute force. It's written into the foundation. Whoever designed this..." The consultant trailed off. Leonard's silence must have been deafening. The boardroom clock ticked past 10:20. The countdown on their screens read 39:40. Every second they failed, Durham's retreat became harder to reverse. At 10:27, Jordan sent me a screen capture. Leonard had tried to access the system under his own executive credentials. The log message was brutal. Executive access denied. Architect status required. It was the first time Monarch had told Leonard Drake to his face that he wasn't in charge. And I can't lie, seeing that line even in a screenshot was satisfying in a way no promotion could ever match. At 10:32, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Harold. It was Leonard himself. The man who had fired me less than 3 hours earlier was now begging me to answer. I didn't. Instead, I typed a single message to Jordan. "Keep documenting everything. Emails, logs, even Slack chatter. We'll need a clean trail," for what Jordan asked. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. For when Cyprus realizes this isn't a glitch, it's ownership, and it's already too late. The countdown on my laptop showed 37:58. And across the city, panic at Cyprus was only just beginning. By 10:45, Cyprus was in full crisis mode. The Slack back channel Jordan Patel had me patched into was a stream of frantic updates, IT managers shouting over one another, the interim CTO red-faced at the console, Sylvia Knox, snapping at anyone who dared ask questions. Then came the kicker, an all-hands calendar invite marked Mandatory Emergency Company Meeting 11:15 a.m. Jordan's message blinked on my phone. "They're going to announce containment measures. Leonard wants to reassure staff." Containment. That word told me everything. They weren't solving the problem. They were spinning it. Meanwhile, my inbox was filling with messages forwarded from Martin Keene, my attorney. Legal letters from Cyprus marked urgent, some dressed in polite corporate language. "We request immediate cooperation to avoid escalation." Others were thinly veiled threats. "Failure to comply may result in injunction or seizure of assets." Martin called me at 10:52. "They're bluffing," he said, his voice steady. An injunction requires standing. Cyprus doesn't own Monarch. Coal Dynamics LLC does. They can huff and puff, but they've got no house to blow down. What about a counteroffer, I asked. They'll try to buy their way out. Of course, Martin said. Expect it any minute. They'll call it a settlement, maybe offer you reinstatement. But Adrian, don't let them frame this as negotiation. You hold the license. They need you, not the other way around. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Harold from legal. It was Leonard Drake himself, no caller ID, but his voice gave him away the second I picked up. Adrian, he began the strain. Obvious, let's put this nonsense aside. You and I both know Cyprus is nothing without Monarch. Come back. I'll make you president of technology. Salary, stock, full control. Whatever you want. It should have been tempting. For a brief second I imagined it, the corner office, the title, the power. But then I remembered the chrome door handle at 7:59 a.m. Leonard's voice cold as he told me I was terminated, the way Brandon smirked, like he'd already inherited my work. And just as clearly, that untouched cup of coffee Leonard had set out on his desk that morning. Cold then, like his dismissal. Cold now, like his desperation. No, I said simply. There was a stunned silence on the line. Then Leonard's voice dropped low and venomous. Do you understand what you're doing? You're destroying everything we built. No, Leonard, I said. You destroyed it the second you chose nepotism over competence. I'm just making sure the wreckage is visible to everyone else. I hung up before he could respond. Jordan's next Slack ping arrived almost immediately. Adrian, you won't believe this. Sylvia just announced to the entire company that Monarch is experiencing a licensing discrepancy and legal is in active talks with the architect. Everyone knows she means you. By 11:05, the press had picked up the scent. TechCrunch blasted the headline, Cyprus Demo, Collapse Raises Licensing Questions Around Monarch AI. On Twitter, screenshots from employees leaked faster than Sylvia's team could threaten takedowns. The hashtag #JarMonarchFail was trending. And then at 11:12 came the moment I had been waiting for. A new article hit the wire, this one, featuring a document Martin had prepared weeks ago. Coal Dynamics LLC, primary holder of Monarch patents, founded by Adrian Cole. The story exploded. Reporters called, investors panicked, employees whispered. For the first time, the world knew the truth. Monarch wasn't Cyprus's crown jewel. It was mine. The emergency all hands began at 11:15 sharp. Jordan Live fed me notes. Leonard tried to project calm, but his voice cracked. We're working closely with the system architect, he lied, and negotiations are proceeding in good faith. Jordan's side message cut through. Half the company is slacking screenshots of your name from TechCrunch. Nobody believes him. I glanced at the box in the corner of my office again. The mug, the photos, the badge that no longer beeped green. Hours ago, they symbolized loss. Now they looked like artifacts from a world that no longer had power over me. At 11:20, my phone buzzed with a message from Charles Whitman. Short, blunt, devastating Cyprus board called me. They're begging for time. We're done. If you're interested, Durham wants to meet with you. I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle. 10 years of work dismissed at 7:59. Now, less than 4 hours later, the board was crumbling. The investors had walked, and the entire tech press had my name in their feeds. Have you ever felt a moment shift under your feet, like you're standing in the eye of a storm, watching everything that tried to break you get torn apart instead? That's what 11:20 a.m. felt like. And in that quiet moment, I thought of my mother, of the LLC I had created years ago to protect her, and the future I wanted to build. This was never just about winning against Leonard. It was about building Monarch the right way on my own terms, without corruption or shortcuts. And as the countdown ticked closer to 0, I realized Leonard still hadn't understood the full truth. He thought this was about getting me back. He hadn't yet seen what would happen when Monarch entered full protective mode. By 11:28 a.m., the countdown had slipped under 30 minutes. On my laptop screen, the numbers ticked down like a metronome of inevitability. 29:59, 29:58. Jordan Patel's Slack updates were clipped, now each one laced with disbelief. The interim CTO just brought in an outside contractor to brute force the admin layer. They're panicking. Another ping override attempt logged access denied. Audit trail recording automatically. That was no accident. I had built Monarch to log every unauthorized attempt into a separate compliance channel. It wasn't just protecting itself, it was documenting the very crime Cyprus was committing in real time. Anyone who understood governance knew that once those logs existed, the board had a fiduciary duty to disclose them to investors or risk SEC sanctions for concealment. By 11:34, Sylvia Knox had escalated. Jordan forwarded me her email marked confidential, HR legal only. Subject emergency protocol. Effective immediately, all employees must route communications through HR. Any leaks regarding Monarch will be treated as breach of NDA and grounds for termination. I shook my head. Termination threats at this point were like yelling at a hurricane to stop blowing. Once the Durham team walked, the company's leverage had evaporated. And then, right on schedule, Monarch spoke. System status protective mode initiated. All access revoked. Licensing inquiry required. The boardroom clock hit 11:37. According to Jordan's feed, the room went silent as the screens turned black, then white, then displayed my mother's name. Authorized Representative Margaret Cole. I don't know what Leonard Drake said in that moment. I only know what Jordan typed rapid fire. Leonard screaming. Brandon blaming the interim CTO. Sylvia on the phone with legal. Board members arguing. I pictured it like a stage play collapsing mid-scene. 10 years of posturing, of arrogance, of dismissals, all burning away under a single line of code that acknowledged my mother as the owner. Leonard must have known what it meant. He had called me that morning disposable. But now every monitor in the company was displaying proof that I wasn't just essential, I was the foundation. At 11:40, my phone lit up with another unknown number. This time I answered. "Mr. Cole, this is the chairman of the Cypress board," a voice said, clipped control desperate under the polish. "We need to resolve this before the market closes. What will it take to reinstate access?" For a moment I considered drawing it out. But then I remembered Sylvia's HR slide from my first day. Respect is the cornerstone of our culture. The irony burned hotter now. "You don't reinstate access," I said. "You never owned it. You licensed it under conditions you broke the second Leonard fired me. The system is just recognizing that fact. Mr. Cole, millions are at stake." "No," I cut in. "Billions. And those billions belong to Cole Dynamics LLC now. You don't negotiate ownership with the person who actually built it." The chairman tried to recover, but his voice cracked. "Are you saying there's no path forward for Cypress?" "There's a path," I said evenly. "It runs through Durham Equity, and it doesn't include Leonard Drake." I ended the call before he could respond. At 11:44, Jordan sent me one final Slack message. "They're pulling the fire alarm. Leonard's ordering everyone out. Says IT will reset the system from scratch. The interim CTO looks like he's about to quit on the spot." Reset. As if Monarch were a desktop, they could unplug and restart. They had no idea that the architecture itself had shifted beyond their reach. As the minutes drained away, I found my eyes drifting to the box in the corner of my office, the mug still wrapped in tissue, the badge that no longer beeped green. A few hours ago, they were relics of a career ended. Now they looked like proof I had walked out on my own terms. At 11:46, I caught a memory I hadn't thought of in years. Leonard during a quarterly all-hands grinning at the boardroom table while telling investors Monarch can't fail. It's architected for eternity. The irony was brutal. He wasn't wrong about the architecture. He was just wrong about who it belonged to. The countdown dropped to 15 The city buzzed outside my window traffic, humming sunlight glinting off the glass towers. Somewhere in one of those towers, Leonard was pacing like a trapped animal, still convinced he could claw back control. But control wasn't the point anymore. It never had been. This was about respect, about proving that competence couldn't be replaced by nepotism, no matter how many titles Brandon Kerr was gifted. It was about protecting the work, yes. But more than that, it was about protecting the future. I had always meant Monarch to have, beyond Cypress, beyond politics, beyond corruption. For my team, for my mother, for the kind of company that didn't just preach respect on HR slides, but lived it. At 11:50, Monarch issued its final notice. System lock complete. For licensing inquiries, contact Cole Dynamics LLC. I closed my laptop, the weight of 10 years, settling into something sharp, clean, and final. Have you ever felt the exact moment when your past burns away and only the future remains? That was 11:50 a.m. for me. Leonard thought this was still about bringing me back. He didn't understand yet there was no back. There was only forward. By 12:02 p.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Slack pings from Jordan Patel, texts from numbers I barely recognized. Missed calls stacked like dominoes, Cyprus board members, investor liaisons, even a voicemail from Sylvia Knox trying to sound professional while her voice cracked. But the only call I answered was the one I'd been waiting for. Jordan. Adrian, he whispered as though someone might overhear half the engineering floor just walked out. We couldn't take Leonard screaming anymore. He threw a chair, literally. Security's blocking the exits, but people are finding ways out through the service stairwell. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that sink in. Monarch wasn't just code, it was people, and those people were done. Jordan, I said, calm, measured. I want all of you safe first. Don't make a scene. Walk out if you can. If not, stall. Document everything. I'll handle the rest. A pause, then his voice steadied. You really did it, didn't you? Monarch isn't theirs anymore. No, I said quietly. It never was. By 12:10, the breakaway had begun. Jordan's Slack feed showed side-channel messages flying across the company. Where's Adrian? We're not staying for Brandon Kerr's pep talk. If Cole has a plan, I'm with him. The irony, Brandon was the only one still trying to sound upbeat. He'd actually sent a mass email to the engineering staff at 12:08. Subject moving forward, together. Team today is about fresh leadership. My uncle believes in me and I believe in you. Together we can rebuild Monarch from scratch. No one is irreplaceable. I almost laughed. 10 years of innovation reduced to a pep talk written like a college club newsletter. No one is irreplaceable. That line alone guaranteed defections. At 12:15, my inbox chimed again, this time a formal notice from Cyprus Legal. Subject: breach of duty. Mr. Cole, your actions today constitute interference with Cyprus intellectual property violation of fiduciary obligations and bad faith conduct. Cease immediately, or we will seek damages. Martin Keene had already flagged it. Boilerplate scare tactic. They're desperate. They can't sue you for owning what you legally filed. Still, I forwarded the email to Jordan. Proof I wrote. Every word they send now shows they know they've lost. By 12:20, it wasn't just engineers leaving. Finance analysts, marketing managers, even a compliance officer I'd barely spoken to messaged me directly. Adrian, if you're building something new, I want in. That was the moment it crystallized. The breakaway wasn't just about me reclaiming Monarch. It was about people choosing who they trusted to lead them. Leonard had titles and a boardroom. I had credibility. I thought back to my box of possessions, the mug, the photos, the ID badge. Hours earlier, they felt like leftovers of a career thrown away. Now they were proof that people had given me loyalty worth more than any title Leonard could dangle. At 12:27, my phone buzzed again. Jordan again, this time with a video. Leonard standing in the middle of the engineering floor shouting at the interim CTO. You fix this or you're fired, Leonard bellowed, veins standing out on his neck. The man's face was pale, his hands trembling over a dead console. It can't be fixed. Monarch doesn't recognize Cyprus anymore. It only recognizes Cole Dynamics. The video ended with Leonard slamming his fist on the desk so hard the mug I'd left behind shattered against the floor. My old mug. World's best boss. I flashed back instantly to the day my team gave it to me. They'd pulled it out at our first product launch, half joking, but deadly serious too. You kept us alive, Adrian Jordan had said, smiling, exhausted, holding that mug like a trophy. That was respect, not HR's slide deck, not empty mission statements. Real respect. Now those shards were under Leonard's shoes. He'd tried to destroy the symbol, but all it did was remind me of what I was protecting: the work, the people, the future. By 12:35, the first articles confirming the breakaway were hitting the wires. Cyprus Exodus engineers reportedly walking out to join former CTO. The stock ticker beside it showed what I already knew: Cyprus was in free fall. And right then, a private Slack channel lit up on my laptop. Jordan had created it. Name, New Monarch. Inside were a dozen familiar names: Sarah from databases, Ravi from security, even Derek Shaw, one of the security guards who had walked me out this morning. We're ready, Adrian Jordan typed. Where do we go from here? I leaned back in my chair. For years, I'd been told I was replaceable, disposable, a cog in Leonard's machine. Now the machine was breaking apart, and the cogs were choosing me instead. Where do we go from here forward? Always forward. By 1:10 p.m., I knew Cyprus was out of time. Not because of any single email or stock ticker, but because Charles Whitman himself, the investor Leonard had been bragging about for months, finally called me directly. "Adrian," he said, without preamble, his voice sharp as a blade, "we've been watching. The board has convened. We want to know if Cyprus has any path left or if you've already taken it from them." I didn't lie. Charles Monarch is locked behind coal dynamics. Cyprus can't access it. And as of 30 minutes ago, half their engineering and compliance staff walked out. There is no path forward under Leonard. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "That matches what we've seen. Leonard's promised too much, delivered nothing. The board is meeting in 15 minutes. I suggest you watch." At 1:25 p.m., I was watching in real time, thanks to Jordan's Slack feed. Someone inside the executive suite had propped a phone against a glass water pitcher. The angle wasn't perfect, but the audio was clear. Leonard was pacing at the head of the boardroom, his tie loose, his voice booming. "We can fix this. The system's just glitching. The staff who left are replaceable. Brandon is stepping up. We don't need coal." I almost laughed. Brandon Kerr, the same cousin who'd sent out that pitiful moving forward together email, was being floated as the savior, while engineers streamed out the back stairwell. His words were already irrelevant before the ink dried on the email. Leonard clung to him because there was nothing left to cling to. Charles Whitman's voice cut through like a scalpel. "Leonard, enough." The room went dead quiet. Even through the shaky feed, you could see Leonard freeze. Charles rarely raised his voice, but when he did, careers ended. "Do you know what I saw today?" Charles continued, each word deliberate. "I saw a $1 billion demonstration collapse in front of Durham's partners. I saw your nephew live-streaming confidential material to the world. I saw your best engineers defect in real time. And I saw your legal team issue threats they cannot enforce." Sylvia Knox tried to interject, her HR director's voice wobbling. We're already drafting recovery protocols." Charles shut her down with a glance. "Sylvia, I don't want recovery protocols. I want accountability. Adrian Cole built the system. Adrian Cole owns the patents. Adrian Cole has the team. And Adrian Cole is not in this room. Do you know what that makes all of you?" Silence. You could hear the HVAC humming. "Expendable," he finished. Leonard slammed his hand on the table. "You can't just side with him. He's one man. I'm the CEO. I'm the one who..." Charles leaned forward, his voice low, lethal. "You're the one who replaced competence with nepotism. You're the one who thought a cousin could substitute for 10 years of expertise. You're the one who ignored every warning sign. And now, you are the reason this company is collapsing." For once, Leonard didn't have a comeback. His face reddened, his jaw clenched, but the words never came. At 1:32, a board member I didn't recognize by voice made the motion. Effective immediately, I move that Leonard Drake be removed as CEO of Cypress Technologies pending investigation into fiduciary misconduct. The motion was seconded before he could even object. The vote took less than a minute. One by one, voices answered aye. Aye. Leonard's voice broke through at the end, desperate. "You can't do this. You need me. You need me." "No," Charles said coldly. "We need results, and Adrian Cole already has them." The phone feed wobbled as if the person recording was shaking with adrenaline. I could just make out Leonard being escorted out of the boardroom by security Paul Riker's bald head, catching the light as he opened the door. Leonard stumbled, muttering, still protesting, but no one listened. Watching it, I felt the symmetry hit me like a weight. At 7:59 a.m., Leonard had fired me behind closed doors, smug and certain I was finished. By 1:40 p.m., he was the one being discarded in front of his entire board. He'd made my firing private and humiliating. Fate made his public and permanent. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the Slack replay. For years, Leonard had been the immovable force in my career, the ceiling I couldn't break through. Now, he was gone, toppled not by a shouting match or a single mistake, but by the truth finally catching up to him. It should have felt like triumph, but what I felt was colder, heavier, a realization that this wasn't about taking Leonard down. It never had been. Jordan pinged me again. "He's out." The board just confirmed. "What's next?" I typed slowly, deliberately. "Next, we show them what leadership looks like when it isn't built on fear and nepotism." I stared at the shards of my old mug still etched in my memory, Leonard's shoes grinding them into the carpet. He'd thought smashing it would break me. Instead, it had reminded me of why this all mattered. Respect. Not slogans, not empty titles. Respect for the work, the people, the future. And as the boardroom collapsed around Leonard, I realized the real climax hadn't come yet. Because now, they were going to come to me. By 9:00 a.m. the next morning, my inbox was a graveyard of desperate subject lines. Urgent licensing proposal, board willing to negotiate, reinstatement options, all from Cyprus domains. Some from addresses that had once CC'd me only when they needed a signature. Now they couldn't hit send fast enough. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I walked into the Whitman Tower, 42nd floor, where the final signing ceremony was already waiting. Coal Dynamics LLC, the entity they had all overlooked, was now the vessel for everything that mattered: Monarch's patents, my team, our future. Jordan Patel was already there, sleeves rolled, grinning like we were finally off the leash. "You're late," he said. For the first time in 10 years, I answered, and it felt good. Charles Whitman greeted me with a firm handshake, the kind that sealed deals long before contracts did. "Adrian, let's make it official." The papers were spread across a walnut table, polished to a mirror sheen. Employment agreements, funding allocations, healthcare packages, real commitments, not the empty platitudes Leonard used to scatter in staff meetings. I glanced at the pen, felt its weight, and for a moment remembered the first day I walked into Cyprus with nothing but a refurbished laptop and a stubborn belief I could build something that lasted. Leonard Drake had called that naive. Yesterday proved it wasn't. As I signed each page, I thought about the pieces of this revenge that had mattered most. It wasn't watching Leonard escorted out by Paul Riker, face red with rage. It wasn't even seeing Brandon Kerr's pep emails become a punchline inside our private Slack. It was Jordan standing here now, loyal as ever. It was the engineers who'd followed me out the door because they believed in more than stock options. It was the quiet knowledge that respect had finally outweighed fear. Halfway through the stack, Charles leaned back. "You realize this isn't just about salvaging Monarch. It's about rewriting the standard for how AI firms are built. No nepotism, no fragile empires. That's what excites us." I nodded. That's what excites me too. Power fades. Culture lasts. By 10:47 a.m., the exact timestamp Leonard had once used to measure my termination appeal, I signed the final page. The room broke into applause. Not loud, not forced, but genuine. Jordan clapped me on the back, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of Cyprus pressing down on me. Almost on cue, my phone buzzed with a voicemail transcript. Sylvia Knox. Her words were halting broken. "Adrian, I know you don't owe me anything, but if you can spare a word to the board, some of us, we're just trying to survive this." I read it twice, then deleted it. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. The symbolic closure came later that afternoon. A courier delivered a small box to my apartment, no return address. Inside were the shards of my old mug swept from the Cyprus boardroom floor. No note, just the fragments. I held one in my hand, its ceramic edge jagged but harmless now. Leonard had tried to grind it into the carpet as if breaking me would make me disappear. Instead, it followed me here as proof some things don't vanish. They endure. By evening, the headlines had shifted from "Cyprus implodes" to "Coal Dynamics secures Whitman backing." Financial channels were dissecting the board vote. Tech blogs were already speculating on our first product launch. The story was no longer about Leonard Drake's downfall. It was about what came next. By close of business, Charles forwarded me a short email from outside counsel. Cyprus had received a preservation notice from an SEC examiner tied to the botched investor demo and undisclosed related party risk. Not my fight anymore, but exactly the kind of mess culture breeds. That night I called my mother. She sounded stronger already, her new treatment plan, fully covered by the healthcare clause I'd just signed. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I corrected her, looking out across the city skyline. "We did it. Everyone who believed in the work did it." She paused, then added, "And Leonard." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Leonard's gone. But honestly, it was never about him. It was about proving that people like him don't get to decide what we're worth. That was the truth I'd buried beneath every strategy, every compliance clause, every careful move. The revenge was never just stripping Leonard of his title. It was creating a future he couldn't touch. At midnight, I poured myself a quiet glass of bourbon and set the broken mug shards on my desk, a reminder of what had been destroyed and what had been rebuilt. My team was already trading ideas in the new Slack channel, Jordan dropping late-night sketches like nothing had changed except everything. They fired me at 7:59 a.m. and thought it was over. By 10:47 the next morning, I had signed the future into existence. That was the real revenge. Not watching them collapse, but standing here now with everything they thought I'd never have: purpose, respect, and a company worth believing in. If you've lived some version of this, tell me yours below, and subscribe so we can keep telling the truth about how work really works. And I promise you this: if you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or treated like you were disposable, you know exactly how sweet that moment tastes.